No one chooses their fate. Your destiny is chosen for you. The Shadow Strays is a Netflix original from Indonesia, written and directed by Timo Tjahjanto, who did May the Devil Take You to Electric Boogaloo, as well as a tape in VHS 2, Electric VHS Boogaloo. He did Safe Haven, the one about the Indonesian death cult that was really tremendous and probably the best tape of the entire VHS franchise, in my personal opinion. He also returned to the VHS franchise with VHS 94's The Subject. And one thing about Timo, he absolutely understands the assignment when it comes to violence, when it comes to gore, and when it comes to in-your-face action. He understands how to do just almost nauseatingly insane camera work, and I mean that in the best way possible. And this basically is an extended edition of Safe Haven's goriest parts. And what do I mean by that? Well, you have 13, who is an assassin, played by Aurora Ribeiro, who apparently is only 20 years old. She's in roles like this, excelling in roles like this. She's going to be a goddamn star. Yeah, you can probably guess where this review is going to go, at least in part. And she is basically tasked with stopping a crime syndicate somewhere in Japan that goes a bit tits up. And then her instructor Umbra, Hannah Malaussen. If I get any of these names wrong, I'm sorry. Those are the only two names I'm going to try to pronounce because I looked at the lineup and I probably screwed those up. I probably screwed up the name of the writer-director. Anyway, so yeah, you have instructor and protege. You have teacher, student, however you want to go about it. And while laying low, 13 basically has a chance encounter with a boy named Manji, and sees that he's in trouble and then realizes that she needs to take down a crime syndicate where the power and the corruption goes all the way to the tippy top. She does this through copious amounts of violence, insane stunts, and some tremendous gore. Now, I will say that is where the movie absolutely excels. Much like Monkey Man, when it wanted to lean into the violence and the insanity, this basically is an Indonesian Monkey Man in the sense that I don't know how they pulled off some of this stuff. The gore was tremendous, the weapon usage, the stunt work, the incredible action. They understood the goddamn assignment. And Timo absolutely understands the camera work needed to basically put you in the vein of the action, in the face of the action, put the action right in your face, however you want to go about it. When it wants to lean into the violence, it's fucking great. It is fucking incredible. It is a great goddamn ride. And it's a good thing that they have that energy to carry the film along because it is 2 hours and 25 minutes, and it's a lot. It's a lot at some points. Now, there are a few issues I do have. A lot of the characters are painfully generic. This is a plot that we have seen done time and time and time again with a few tweaks and everything. And when it comes to Indonesian films, I think it's more of a cultural difference. I've seen a few that I've liked, but some just haven't resonated with me. This did resonate with me, though, from the opening sequence to, yeah, they go a little bit low for a while. But Aurora's acting ability actually is very much on display here. She does a great job as a conflicted, young assassin that really wants to do things her way and gets wrapped up in this thing that just gets more and more ridiculous and visceral and violent, and it's a lot of fun. Now, there are a few little attempts at emotional depth that I don't think really hit like they intended. It makes sense storyline-wise as to why they went this route, and there were a few teases that maybe this might end up becoming a franchise. I actually could kind of see it, because they kind of leave it open-ended for a possible sequel. That's not necessarily a spoiler. You probably can guess a little bit early on that they would be doing something like that. But yeah, there's a lot of really, really good stuff to sink your teeth into. A few issues, especially with the narrative and some of the characters, really outside of 13 and Umbra and 13's interactions with Manji, and the kid's fine. The villains are kind of stock. The whole thing about, the plot and what's causing all this, woo, is pretty standard, but it really does excel with the violence and really does, end up being a whole lot of fun. It offers a lot on its plate. It's not just a buffet. It's several buffets of violence. It's like 7-course meals of violence, like a few of them, to the point where you're like No Face and Spirited Away. You are just consuming all this shit. And You might get sick of it. You might get sick, maybe, of the fact that you wonder, at least I wondered, how a few particular characters survive so goddamn much. You can understand the main characters, that's kind of the point. But there are a few characters where I'm like, okay, there's this one character, Soraya, I don't understand how the hell she survived all that she survived. Though the actress playing her, goddamn, absolutely gorgeous. And so I wouldn't mind seeing her in more villain roles because she actually did a pretty good job. But yeah, most of the villains are pretty stock, and there's a lot of sets that you have seen in a lot of American movies. And had this been an American movie, probably wouldn't have worked nearly as well. In fact, this probably would have been punishing in the wrong way. But this movie doesn't punish you for watching it. It rewards you. You just got to be ready to put up with a lot of goddamn violence. It's on Netflix if you want to check it out. I'm getting into spoilers. 3, 2, 1, and spoilers. So once again, Aurora, great in this. Hannah, great, but it is mostly focused around 13. And there are, there's a crew of assassins that live in the shadows. There's a quote from Medusa. At the nadir of this hell, a strange feeling overwhelmed me. It's both maddening and comforting. And there's a guy that she basically, too many pronouns, pal, sorry, Vince McMahon. 13 is trying to stop, hiding among some suits of samurai armor. There's a guy that wants to demean a geisha-dressed woman. I don't know why we necessarily need to demean women. It doesn't go that far. Again, have some issues with some of that stuff, but nevertheless. So the violence is just incredible, though. I mean, there are people getting their heads hacked off. There's this talk of, like, the shadows of death will cause a whistle of death. Basically, it's the oxygen leaving your body when your throat gets slashed. And there's a point where his head's hanging on just long enough, the boss, and then various people get killed. But she ends up getting dispatched after the geisha woman ends up getting shot. And that kind of reminds her of something that happened in her past with her mother. Her mother's dead. And then suddenly there's there's great camera work here by Timo, and then Umbra shows up. We find out who she is, and she ends up taking out the rest of them. She basically takes out this guy Kenjiro, I believe, and it says no one chooses their fate. Your destiny is chosen for you. She kills him, and then she brings 13 back with some weird injection thing that I guess it's like an adrenaline shot that I guess just cures bullet wounds because whatever, she was shot. It's fine. It's okay. It's an assassin movie. And yeah, Kenjiro had a family. I'm probably screwing up that name. He had a family, and Umbra's upset because this reminds her of something that she did a while ago. Gee, I wonder if this has any ties to how 13 became an assassin. Spoiler, it does. We do end up going 23 minutes into the goddamn movie before we get to the credits. And mind you, this is a 2 hour and 25 minute movie. There's a guy called Master Barai. He's kind of the leader. Leader. I love the Indonesian leader. And after a chance encounter with Manji, who basically has a mother that's a bit of a drug addict, but also is kind of used as a lady of the evening, shall we say. The mother's killed by a guy named Ariel, who's a brother of a guy, or who's an associate of a guy named Haga. There's, there's familial stuff and relations and everything, and they're relatives of some description. Manji basically is kind of all upset because he's at this food side bar restaurant thing. I don't know what they eat. I don't know what they eat in Indonesia. I'm sorry. It looked good. But anyway, 13 basically takes him to his mother's grave. They have an interaction. She says you can always talk to your mother. She's always there. And then there's an associate of a guy named Haga that's kind of a boss, so to speak. Jeki is the guy's name. The lowly guy. But actually, that actor is pretty good. He was pretty good, all things considered. Though his character arc really does kind of accelerate massively. And she beats him up and pins his foot on the toilet. trying to find a woman to treat me like that. I don't have issues. You have issues. I don't mean her specifically. I mean just, hell, anybody at this point. Nevertheless, let's get back to this. She basically finds out about this guy, Haga, says, take me to him. There's a dance club scene, and the actress, again, playing Soraya, my goodness, what gorgeous eyes. Good grief. So anyway, 13 then suddenly is able to break away and look for information and find stuff. And it turns out Haga is actually the guy that ended up killing the mother. And is also looking for Manji because Manji suddenly disappeared. Spoiler, Ariel, who happens to be the kid's father, I assume, had, him or Haga, had the guy, captured the goddamn kid. But then, basically, she just goes all off and beats people up and hits them with just knife that doesn't look like knives, guns, all this kind of stuff, swords, using bottles, just breaking shit all over. There's like a needle with some kind of Narcon or whatever the hell it was, get your Narcon, that Haga tries using, but he ends up getting killed in pretty spectacular fashion, I might add. But Soraya actually is so funny because she's trying to shoot at 13, but that doesn't work because the body shield thing is being done. And Soraya suddenly, she survives a lot of impact. I mean, a lot. Like, she's getting slashed, she's getting cut as well. And yeah, I know you need to have certain, like, bits of, like, just throwing your logic out the goddamn window. But there are things where I'm like, again, with the main character, I get it. Whatever, when they lean into the violence, again, this movie excels. The police are corrupt. Because, of course, they are. There's a guy named Pross that is associated with an older guy, not in that way, that wants to become governor, and that happens to be Ariel's father. He just wants money for his campaign so he can become governor of Jakarta, I think is the name of the city. So, anyway, Manji is trapped by Ariel. Ariel wears a gimp mask for some reason. I don't necessarily get it. It kind of reminded me of Andrade El Olio. That is a deep cut for wrestling fans. Nobody else will get that. So, there was a thing discussed earlier where Umbra and this guy called the Handler that speak in English, and that threw me the fuck off. I mean, I'm not saying that I didn't expect English, in movies, but just, I was like, oh, they're speaking Indonesian or Japanese, and wait, they're speaking English. Oh, I guess I don't have to necessarily read the captions or the subtitles, but they're going to go to Cambodia. Meanwhile, all this time, 13 was supposed to lay low, but she's like, I can't do that. This kid that I met 2 days ago needs help, and there's corruption, and I'm going to use my particular set of skills to kill people and not lay low. So we go to Cambodia, where there's a guy named Trokya, I think is his name. He uses the Kona Crush to kill a guy. And he's just a big old tall man. And then there are these shadow deserters, apparently, that were part of this group. There was a character named Volver, I believe. This was kind of all thrown at us. Like, there weren't too many parts of the movie that dragged, but there were a few parts that could have been cut. And then there were parts where just like, we're throwing information at you. So nevertheless, it turns out that actually this character of Volver is pregnant, but apparently I guess these assassins can't get pregnant. They don't really explain any of that stuff. She ends up getting killed. But now the idea is, well, the Handler says, Umbra, we have to go take care of this because your protege is going absolutely batshit insane. And, okay. And then Jackie actually goes back to take care of his grandmother. Press and a bunch of people show up in masks that really look ridiculous because you can tell who the fuck they are. They're the clear plastic masks where, I guess you could breathe easier, but they can tell who the fuck you are. But then 13 shows up and basically ends up killing them and doing a whole bunch of violence and stuff like that. And Jackie ends up basically now going with her on this thing because now he basically must protect his grandmother. Well, in general, he doesn't really have anybody left, and he's a wanted man. And she ends up trying to go get Monji at Ariel's house, but then they capture her pretty easily, where she's just sitting there on a bike and then suddenly sees this car that's speeding, and yeah, the car is speeding. You still could have run away, but no, she didn't do that. She got hit, tossed over the goddamn car, and then Pross basically is going to try to kill her. Everybody steps back, seemingly out of frame, but then she traps him, bites his ear off, and then gouges his eyes. I mean, just plunges her goddamn thumbs right into his goddamn eyes. And there were moments where I'm like, wow, okay, oh, that's where we're going. Okay, that's fun. But then they get her pretty easily. Ariel puts on the GIMP mask after calling her a fucking psycho. Again, I don't get the GIMP mask thing. He was basically being blackmailed by the mom because he knocked up the mom. And the dad wanted him to take her to the clinic and get rid of it, basically. But the dad is like, dad comes in and sees that, this assassin is trapped and says, the fuck, son, why are you always screwing up this stuff? So basically, he says to 13, or whatever her name is, he doesn't actually know what her name is, hey, you work for me, I'll give you the kid. By the way, Manji is fucked. I mean, he had the shit beat out of him earlier by Ariel. Ariel's like, I don't want anything to do with this. Don't beat up your children. Don't pull an Indonesian Chris Benoit. The dogs are in the enclosed pool area and the side garage door to somewhere is open. So, then there's this deal for drugs in some kind of airplane hangar, giant parking garage thing with other people to get money for this campaign, I assume, which, of course, turns into a buffet of violence where Jackie's in the car, he gets upset because Manji is dead, he has this attachment to a kid that for some reason, whatever, it's fine. It's fine. It doesn't necessarily need to make sense when the violence is so good. Yeah, Manji is dead, basically. And then there's a part where basically the whole thing breaks down. Jackie ends up running a van, or the van into like a table area with either product or something, I don't know. That ends up triggering everybody to basically pull their triggers and we get a bunch of gun violence. The father gets shot a lot for about 15 to 20 seconds and I'm like, I think you got him. But, nevertheless, Soraya is still alive. She was still alive earlier when, 13 was being tortured before the dad came in. I'm like, how is she still alive? How is she still alive? Don't worry, she dies here, except she doesn't. But, I just don't understand how the fuck she was alive to this point. The fire effects were probably the weakest part of any of this, where I'm like, ooh, those were fun. Didn't necessarily work, but we got a lot of great action here. We got, we got GIMP Mask Ariel in his, basically in his suit, cutting people up and shooting people, but then him and 13 get in a battle. He had a bat earlier that he was going to torture her with. And that ends up kind of becoming his undoing, when he gets burned by some fire, so the GIMP mask is kind of on there, which probably singed quite a bit. And she breaks out the bat, and she cuts his throat, and here's the whistling. That's the whistle of your death. Going back to this whole thing of all this insanity. And then, then they get captured by Handler and Umbra. And Troika, I think is his name. Handler calls her an insolent little C word. I can't say that on here, but it rhymes with bunt. And then Jackie tries to help her get away, but he ends up getting shot. She somehow manages to get out in restraints and cut herself away and then beat up the much taller individual, that Troika guy, by basically getting her hands free, stabbing him multiple times, and hooking him and just jawing him and everything and that kind of stuff. Again, really good shit. And then she ends up having a final showdown with her instructor, which leads to them both getting stabbed, both getting hurt. But then she's able to basically trigger this bomb, this nail bomb that every assassin apparently has. And the nails basically get Umbra. And then the handler shows up and he's like, okay, you need to kill her. No, don't you do that. And then he shoots Umbra when she delays. And then he gets killed, because of course he does. He wasn't handling that very well. And yeah, there's basically that. And just before Umbra dies, she basically tells her name is Nami. And then it turns out that Umbra actually killed her mother. That's the name your mother gave you. It ties back to when she woke up just to see her mother die. Now she sees Umbra die, who was like a mother to her. And then she has this shot thing, apparently, again, that I guess resurrects you. I thought she shot Namanji, but I guess she did. It didn't work. She buries him. And we've only got a few minutes left, by the way, and suddenly another crazy lady shows up. 14. I guess it's a ranking system. Still better than AEW's ranking system. And she's there, and she's like, I'm going to kill you. I've got a few people. And then suddenly a guy shows up in a helmet and basically evens the odds. But then she says, well, you know what? I'm going to kill you both slowly, but I'm going to leave now. See ya, sequel tease. And then it turns out it's Barai. He'll help her because she's his responsibility. That was a lot in the last, 20 minutes, by the way. It felt like they didn't drag their feet necessarily, but kind of went with with a little bit too much exposition or padding after the first sequence of violence, when they could have easily cut, I'd say, 15 minutes and probably tightened things up a little bit. But that being said, they're obviously trying to set up a franchise. At least I think so. I don't know why they would throw all that way and all that at the end if they weren't. But yes, even with the narrative issues, even with some of the stock characters, I still have to give it an A- for the violence alone. The violence, the stunts, and everything carry this movie. Had they not been nearly as good, this probably would have been 2 grades lower. It barely would have been average. So yeah, A-. Agree, disagree, what I said. Like, share, subscribe. Twitter, Letterboxd, and Blue Sky handles in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I'll see you soon.